So we close down this cement factory, and in return, we'll import our cement from China, where they emit 1.1 tonnes of CO2 gas for every tonne of cement they produce. So we've cost Australian jobs, but global emissions will actually go up. Because the Chinese do it in a less environmentally friendly way than we do it. And the important thing to remember about an emissions trading scheme is that the reason why you have it is to try and increase the cost of things that we do that emit CO2 gases, damage the climate, so much, raise the cost so much that we stop doing it. Putting the price up doesn't of itself reduce emissions. It's only if we stop doing things that emit the CO2 gases that it actually makes any difference. So the idea is to put the price of electricity, for instance, up so much that you turn off your heaters on a cold morning or your air conditioners on a hot day and save some electricity, and therefore you emit CO2 gases. Now, I come from Queensland, it gets a bit hot up there, and I'm not convinced that Queenslanders will turn their air conditioners off on a 40-degree day just because the price of electricity has gone up by 40% or even 100%. They might go without food or don't go out to dinner one night, but they're going to want to keep cool. So the CO2 emissions are going to continue in the atmosphere. So for an emissions trading scheme to work, it's actually got to hurt, and hurt so hard that we stop doing things that we like to do because of our concerns about the environment. So don't think this is something that only 1,000 big companies are going to have to pay for. That's what the government tells you. Only 1,000 companies are going to actually have to fill out all the paperwork and pay the CO2 taxes. But it's because they're going to pass it on to everybody else. And we are going to have to change our behaviour if we're actually going to get anywhere as a result of implementing a scheme of this nature. So that's what you've got to take into account. If we close down coal-fired power stations in Australia because they emit CO2 gases, and in fact charge ourselves the extra cost of getting our electricity from wind power or solar power or hot rocks or something else, all of which are many times the cost of coal-fired power electricity. Wind is about 3 times as expensive, solar about 6 times, and the rest just keep going up. So you're not talking about just a little increase in the price of electricity, you're talking about very big increases. And if we're going to move to entirely renewables. But while we do all this, if the rest of the world is not a part of this, in fact, global emissions are not going to go down. They're not going to actually achieve anything. That's why it's appropriate for Australia to be a part of any discussion about a global response. But of us going out there, costing jobs in Australia without the rest of the world following, we haven't actually gained it. Let me give you another quite interesting example, because I know many of you come from the land, and you've probably heard the concerns about the proposals to tax the emissions from animals. No government is actually proposing to do that at the present time because they don't know how. You can imagine all these scenes of people with white coats running around, cows in the paddock waiting for a bit of air out the front of the back and measure it, so they know how much they can tax that cow. And because what comes out of cows is methane, that is one of the worst polluting gases, and so they actually multiply what comes out of a cow by 21%, by 21 times to make it equivalent to what comes out of a power station, things like that. So the tax on cattle on a cow will be actually quite severe because it's considered to be among the worst emitters. And they make up a fair proportion of Australia's total emissions. But if we tax our cattle industry, our sheep and our kangaroos and our koalas and everything else, then clearly it's going to have an impact on our nation as a whole. We'll be less competitive in trying to sell beef around the world. But think of the Indians. And we've got 30 million cattle in Australia. The Indians have got about 300 million. And they're Hindus, and so cows are sacred. Their emissions are sacred. So I can't imagine the Indians taxing their cattle. So a tax that we put on our cattle is countries who are not doing the same thing. So we need to be sensible about this. We need to be talking about how we can make constructive contributions towards reducing emissions without it costing Australian jobs and hurting our lifestyle. And the important thing to remember through all of this, you don't actually reduce emissions by putting on a new tax. You don't actually have less emissions just simply because you're trading pieces of paper. You've actually got to reduce the CO2 emissions. And in government, we were doing that. We had a multi-billion-dollar program to reduce our CO2 emissions, with encouraging the use of solar electricity and wind power, solar cities, or modern technology in relation to carbon capture and storage, a whole range of exciting projects that we were funding. And we didn't do it with a special tax. We just did it out of the routine revenue of the government, and we were achieving real and practical results. So this is going to be a difficult debate for us, as it is for people in other parts of the world. It's quite clear the Americans are walking away from their scheme now. The New Zealanders have said, well, they'll wait and see what's happening in Australia. The Europeans have a scheme, but what the Rudd government is proposing has 500 times the impact on consumers as does the European scheme. 500 times. So the reality is no one else is in the world at the present time is proposing a scheme such as Labor is proposing in Australia. So we've said what Labor's got on the table is not good enough. We're prepared. We'll be talking tomorrow about a series of amendments which will make it better. And obviously, if we can make the scheme better, everyone will want to do that. But in the end, there'll be a more difficult decision to make, and that is whether we want to be in this thing, we want to be the first in the world to have a carbon pollution reduction scheme like this, or whether we want to be a part of a global effort which will be developed over the months and the years ahead. And those are some of the difficult decisions that Stephen, Richard and John and I have got to make over the next few months, and we certainly appreciate your advice and assistance in that regard. So thank you for coming tonight. It's been interesting to meet with you. There are obviously lots of other things that are happening at the national level. We're having successes too. I know the polls don't look good, and there's a bit of despair and so forth from time to time, but let me assure you, you do have a very effective leader in Malcolm Turnbull who's got enormous capability. You have a very effective shadow ministry that's able to quickly grasp the reins of government if we're given a chance. So I ask you to get behind your team and make a real effort to return Tasmanians again to the lower house of our federal parliament, because working together, we believe we can get our country working solidly again, restore some of the damage that's been done in such a short period of time by this government, and make sure that our country can not only be economically strong, but also environmentally